Are you ready for some statistics? An estimated 6.5 million domestic animals are impounded at municipal animal control facilities each year in the United States. Approximately 3.3 million are dogs and 3.2 million are cats. Out of these millions of animals, only a small percentage, an estimated 710,000, are reclaimed by their owners. Here's another statistic. About 1.5 million domestic cats and dogs that enter municipal shelters are humanely euthanized each year. Some are euthanized due to sickness or severe injuries, others for vicious dispositions, and sadly, in some of the larger urban areas where abandonment numbers are high, there are still animals that are euthanized simply because there is no space for them. Here is one last statistic. The annual cost to taxpayers for staffing animal control facilities and sheltering all of the abandoned animals is approximately $2 billion. Do these statistics shock you? They should. While the number of animals entering into facilities has declined over the years and the euthanasia rate has dropped, the percentages are still staggering. Take a good look at some of the faces of those statistics. These are the abandoned, the unwanted, and the often misunderstood.
Hi, I'm Sergeant Paula Keller with the New Britain Police Department, and I want to thank you for joining us on this first episode of Animal 411, a series of programs dedicated to providing you with information on animals. We're going to start this first series out by providing you information with what happens behind the curtain at the Animal Control Division in New Britain. Now, our Animal Control Division is actually part of the Police Department, so we are a division of the Police Department, and there's myself, the supervisor, and I have 3 animal control officers who work under me. Now, we're all sworn police officers here at New Britain Animal Control, and we handle everything from calls to service to cleaning the kennels. Now, our calls for service range from picking up stray dogs, responding to sick animals, injured animals, nuisance complaints, and of course, animal abuse. So just a little bit about our facility. We have 18 kennels at our facility, and we house dogs. We don't have a facility for cats right now, and when people do call in for cat complaints, we try to provide them information with local rescues to assist them. So those 18 kennels that we have an indoor and outdoor space, and that includes 2 quarantine kennels as well, because when dogs bite, they need to be quarantined, and we can quarantine them here at our facility. We have an average of 12 dogs at any given time at our facility. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. That number fluctuates depending on how many dogs come in that week and how many dogs leave. Now, how do dogs leave our facility? Well, most of them, fortunately, are able to be adopted out. But unfortunately, we don't have a choice on what kind of animals that we pick up. We can't pick and choose the animals that we take in. We have to take in the old, the sick, the injured, and yes, sometimes the vicious dogs. Not all dogs are safe to be adopted out to the public, and that's our number one goal is public safety here at our facility. So those dogs that you saw in the beginning, those are all dogs that we have at our facility that are awaiting adoption. So what's their story? Where did they come from? Why are they here? How long will they sit here? And what happens to them from the minute they get picked up until the minute they're adopted out? What's the process when an animal comes into our facility? These are questions that we often get from the general public, who are a lot of times misinformed, thinking that we have 7 to 10 days and then the animals are put down. That's a misconception. We do a lot for our animals. Myself and my staff care very much about the animals that come into our facility. And fortunately for us, most of our animals are healthy and adoptable animals. But we want to show you what that process is. What happens to the animals when they're abandoned? Because that's what it is. Most of these animals are purposely abandoned by their owners. Most of the animals that come into our facility were owned by somebody at some point. We know this because they're not feral, meaning they're not wild. Some of them know their commands. Some of them know how to sit, stay. Some of them are spayed or neutered. Some of them know how to roll over. They take treats gently. We know they've been in houses before. So these are purposely abandoned animals that end up in our facility. So we do our best to temperament test them, so get them up for adoption and to get them into good homes again. Think of the trauma the animal goes through. Being dumped out of its home onto the street, taken into a facility by strangers, and being brought into a kennel with a bunch of other barking dogs. It's a very traumatic experience, and it's one that we know that the dogs need our assistance to get through. And we're going to show you what it is that we do for these animals when they come into our facility, and how we temperament test them, and how we get them out into homes where they can be a nice family pet and in a loving atmosphere where they can be playing with a ball in a backyard and rolling in the grass and not here in our kennel. So take a moment and join us on this journey, and I hope you enjoy our show.
It all begins with that first phone call.
Unit 120?
120.
Please respond to Walnut Hill Park for a dog tied to a fence near the Rose Garden.
It is usually a good citizen who calls our dispatch center to report a roaming or abandoned dog. Imagine being pulled out of your house, driven miles away, and dumped in a place you do not recognize while watching the only people you know drive away. Being abandoned is a traumatic event for a dog. Dogs are found in parks, roaming on streets and in parking lots, and sometimes we do find them tied to fences or telephone poles. We know the dogs that are tied up are probably going to be more traumatized and may act out by barking or appearing aggressive. Our officers understand this and will take their time approaching with a calm demeanor, and they'll use dog treats to kind of calm the dog down and refocus its energy. There are times when a pole snare becomes necessary, but it is never our first choice. We know the dog has already been through a traumatic experience, and a pole snare will only add to their anxiety. But officer safety is always number one, so in the event the dog is unapproachable, the pole snare must be utilized. This initial encounter with the dog begins our observation and temperament reading. Even though we know the dog is not in its right state of mind and is oftentimes frightened, agitated, or excited, we do have a baseline that we can use to judge the dog's behavior, and that baseline comes from the average behavior of the dogs we take in. Most of the dogs we take in are able to be handled on initial contact. They react positively to humans and are not actively aggressive. Dogs that are growling, snapping, and snarling and not allowing contact are red flagged and will have to be watched more carefully in the next few days during the decompression period. We know that fear is a huge trigger for aggression, and what can be scarier than being abandoned and then approached by a stranger? Most of the time, the dogs that are abandoned are happy to see us, especially if they have been tied to a fence overnight. Surprisingly, the majority of dogs that are abandoned still trust humans and crave human contact. They are pretty amazing animals. Most dogs can be transported to the facility in the dog truck, and sometimes they even get to ride up front. But whenever we have an extra large dog, an obese or an old dog that we may have trouble getting into the truck, we will utilize the back of a patrol car for transport. We want to make sure they are transported safely. At the facility, the animal control officer is going to leave the dog in the vehicle while he gets a kennel set up and completes a temperament card. In New Britain, a police case number and a police report are generated for every dog that comes in, and all incoming dogs have what we call a temperament card completed upon their arrival. The temperament card was designed as a way to record important information on the new dog. The temperament card will list the case number, date and time the dog was located, the officer transporting the dog, and a brief description of the dog. The card also has check boxes on it that an officer can use to record the dog's behavior on initial contact. Was the dog friendly, aloof, scared, vicious? Was a pole snare used? Is the dog malnourished? Is it sick or injured? This is important information for all of the animal control officers who may be handling the dog to know. The back of the card also has space to document things like behavioral issues or medication dosage. It is common for dogs to come into our facility with existing medical conditions that need to be treated. Most common are skin infections or internal parasites, so we would have the dog examined by a veterinarian, and medication would have to be administered, so it's important for us to keep track of this. The dog is given fresh water only upon intake. The dogs are usually very excited and anxious when they first come into the facility, so feeding them right away is probably not a good idea as it can cause stomach upset and in some cases, vomiting. Once the card is complete and the kennel has been set up with water and a bed, the dog is then walked into the kennel. Plastic beds that are raised off the floor are standard in the kennels. Depending on the dog's demeanor, we sometimes provide them with soft bedding. However, we do have to be careful of the dog chewing and swallowing pieces of blankets or bedding, especially overnight, as this can be dangerous for the dog and may cause an obstruction. Each kennel has a corresponding bin where the temperament card is stored once it is completed and is also where any other information or medications for the dog will be stored. There are a number of tasks we must do for each new dog. The Connecticut Department of Agriculture requires each municipality taking in dogs to complete a municipal animal control officer's report. This report is sent to the state at the end of each month, and it's a record of each dog that has entered and exited the facility. The yearly report runs from July 1st to June 30th, and each dog is assigned an impound number in sequential order. The report records where the dog was found, the type of complaint, a description of the dog, and also the status of the dog, whether it was adopted, reclaimed, euthanized, or carried over to the following month. We use a dry erase board here to list the dogs in the kennels. With so many dogs in and out, it helps us to keep track of what dogs are in which kennels. We list the impound number, the name of the dog, description of the dog, and the potential adoption date, and any other information such as a quarantine if it's here on a dog bite, or cautious if the dog is displaying vicious behavior. State law also requires the municipality to place an ad in the local newspaper with a description of the dog. Once the ad is in the paper, the dog is then on hold for 7 days. This gives the owner an opportunity to come and reclaim their pet. If the pet's not reclaimed within the 7-day period, the dog can then be placed for adoption. We then take pictures of the dog and post it on our Facebook page, New Britain Police for Pups, and also on Pet Finder. The next process for the dog is the scanning for a microchip. We found that scanning a dog immediately on intake can sometimes scare them because the scanner does emit a beeping sound. So once the dog has had a chance to decompress for a little while, we then take him into the office and scan for the microchip. Microchips are a great and inexpensive way to ensure the safe return of your pet if it is lost. Most municipalities use scanners to check incoming pets, so it is important to keep your contact information up to date with the microchip company. There are several microchip companies available, so talk with your veterinarian to find out more information. Every morning, the animal control officer comes in for kennel maintenance. This is done 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The officer first does a visual sweep of the kennels to see if any new dogs came in overnight and to make sure none of the dogs had any vomiting or runny stool. Then each dog is fed the appropriate amount of food for its size and weight. When we get dogs that appear thin, they get fed twice a day. We feed our dogs dry dog food, and in the event we get a picky eater or a small dog, we can feed them some canned food. It is normal for a new dog to be nervous to eat for a day or two, but anything beyond that, or any dog that previously had an appetite that has suddenly stopped eating, will be brought to the vet for an exam. Each day, every food and water bowl is collected, washed, and then soaked in a sanitary bleach solution to kill off any possible bacteria or viruses. Once the dogs are fed and the bowls are collected, it's time to clean the kennels. This is a 2-step process, just like the food dishes. First, the kennels are cleaned using a cleaning solution and a high-powered hose to rinse off all of the debris. Once the kennels are cleaned, they are then sanitized using a solution especially designed for kennels. This sanitizer will kill all types of viruses, including parvovirus, which is a highly contagious virus spread through the fecal matter of the infected dog. Once the kennels are clean, fresh water is provided and the dogs are checked on throughout. After the 7-day hold, dogs can be placed for adoption, but prior to posting any dog on the New Britain Police for Pups Facebook page or Pet Finder, we will do some preliminary temperament testing. We usually like to bring the dogs into the office and have a couple of officers to interact and observe. This is as close to a home environment as we will get at our facility. We handle the dogs, give treats, and show them some different toys. What we're looking for is any behavior that may tell us the dog may have certain issues, such as fixation, where they cannot be redirected from a toy, or food aggression. We also like to try and give the dog commands to see if it has had any training. Obviously, it's very hard to get a true reading on a dog in this strange environment, and sometimes issues won't reveal themselves until the dog is comfortable in its surroundings. The more comfortable we can get the dog, the more the dog will relax and start to show its true personality. People often ask if a dog is good with children. This is difficult for us to assess as we do not have children to temperament test the dogs with. When it comes to young children, we prefer a young dog, less than a year old, unless we know the history of the dog. We also have to watch for larger young dogs that are very rambunctious as they can knock a small child over. We have to make sure we are doing the very best we can to assess the dogs that come in, and as our number one goal is public safety, and we do not want to see anyone get hurt or see our dogs end up in an inappropriate environment. This is the face of an abandoned dog. Tara really was found tied to a fence in our city. and she was in a pretty remote area where the only way she was found was because of her barking. Imagine how traumatizing that was for her. And she's not a young dog. We estimate Tara to be about 7 years old, and she was probably with the same person or family for her whole life until they decided to abandon her. I will never understand how tying your dog to a fence post and deserting it is ever an option. Once we do a general temperament test, it's then time to expose the dog to another dog. This is one of the most difficult parts of the temperament test, as we have to ensure the safety of both dogs and handlers. We make sure to use very secure harnesses to prevent the dogs from getting loose, and then we walk them, keeping them a distance apart so we can't read their body language. We usually have at least one dog in the facility that we can rely on to be the test dog. The test dog is a dog that has shown no aggression towards the other dogs and is extremely docile in just about every exposure. Sasha is our current test dog, as she has gotten along well with everyone. What we look for when the dogs are apart is how focused the new dog is on the test dog. Is there an unwavering stare? Is there growling, hackle standing up? Is the new subject dog pulling and unable to be redirected? If any of these things are occurring, we know we have to be cautious as we close the gap, and there may be times when we do not close the gap. Sometimes the aggression is so obvious, we will call the test off. So we can see that Tara has pretty good body language, appears curious, but is not pulling, and she's not barking and does not appear to be uncomfortable. The two of them seem to be pretty comfortable walking together, which is a great sign, but it doesn't always mean that there won't be any dog aggression issues. Not all aggression appears immediately, especially in a kennel environment. And we know that all dogs are different, and they may like one dog and not another, just like we don't always like every person we meet. Sometimes dogs like dogs their own size, but will have a prey drive for a smaller dog, or sometimes they don't like dogs that are bigger than them. That is why we require a potential adopter to bring their dog in for a meet and greet. After the walk, we keep the dogs outside and in the same general area to continue the test. Sasha really is the perfect test dog, as her personality is very sweet. She loves everyone she meets and is great with all the dogs, even the ones who aren't so thrilled to be around her. She may look old, but don't let her looks fool you. Based on her energy level, we think she's about 5 years old, and she still has a lot of spunk. Sasha, like most of our other dogs, was found roaming in one of our city's neighborhoods, and no one has called to look for her. Although it's sad that she has ended up at a municipal animal shelter, we are certain we can find her a better home where she won't be abandoned. We always seem to have one or two dogs that we call our long-term guests. These are dogs that for some reason or another have just continually been passed over for adoption. We would like you to meet Scarlett, our current long-term guest. Scarlett is a female brindle pit mix and is about 6 years old. She was actually relinquished to us by her owner, who could no longer keep her. She'd been living in the apartment that her owner was evicted from, along with another dog. The apartment was in deplorable conditions, as neither dog was being taken outside and no one was cleaning up after them. The owner managed to find a family member to take the other dog, but still had nowhere for Scarlett to go, so he called us. Scarlett was lonely, scared, and pretty stinky when we showed up to take her. Since she's been with us, we have all really bonded with her. She is very cuddly and affectionate and loves to lay in the grass or your lap if it's available. She'll play with toys, but will gladly drop her toy for some attention, which is a great sign. It means she prefers the attention of people rather than things, even dog treats. We know from experience that Scarlett is dog selective. She has met some dogs that she gets along with, and some she has not. She also does not like smaller dogs or cats. And this, unfortunately, makes her harder to place. Scarlett also managed to tear her ACL while she's been here. Now, ACL tears are a very common injury in dogs, and there is surgery that can be done. And with the help of some of our local supporters, we were able to raise enough money for her surgery. But we can't find a foster for her, so she sits here waiting. She's been spayed and vaccinated and microchipped, and she's just waiting for the right person to come along. But Scarlett's story is just one of many. So many dogs pass through our facility every year, each with their own story. Some, like Scarlett, we have a little background on, and others we will simply never know what their story is. We will never know what their name is, where they came from, or why they ended up with us. It's very frustrating watching all of these dogs sitting in their kennels staring off into the distance. I wonder what they are thinking about. Are they waiting for their owners to show up? Or are they happy to be out of whatever home they were in and dreaming of the day they will be in the loving home with people who will treat them like part of the family and never desert them? The rate of abandonment is much higher in urban cities, where there are more rental properties and overbreeding of pets. Abandonment is not as prevalent in towns comprised of mostly single-family homes. And based on the phone calls we receive, we know the number one reason for pet abandonment in the urban areas is because people who are living in rental properties get pets that they know they're not supposed to have. The landlord finds out, and the threat of eviction forces people to make choices, and not very good ones. Whatever the excuse, throwing your pet into the streets is never the answer. Until we find a way to prevent people from abandoning their dogs, cities and towns will continue to spend time, money, and resources to clean up after these irresponsible people, but it is the animals that pay the ultimate price. All of our dogs have a story, a past we will never know. They don't know why they are here, or what their future holds. They look at us with hope, greet us with appreciation, and strive for our attention. Most of them crave human touch more than anything. For the most part, we are their last hope. We are their caretakers, their advocates, and their entertainment. We know they have been traumatized, and we treat them with respect regardless of their age, breed, and even their disposition. They all deserve dignity. They come in all different sizes, colors, and breeds, each with their own unique personality. It is up to us to clean up the mess left by the irresponsible people who made a decision to abandon them, or to not bother looking for them. We take them in, we feed them, we play with them, and we get them necessary veterinary care. For the most part, we probably do more for them in the time they are with us than their owners ever did. While the animal facility is not the ideal place for them, they are safe and they are cared for, and with any luck, it is their path to a loving, forever home.
Each year, the New Britain Animal Control Facility takes in about 300 animals, mostly dogs, mostly pit mixes, like Scarlet here. Pit mixes are common in urban areas. There's a lot of overpopulation and overbreeding with the pit bull mixed type dogs. And there is a big misconception about their personalities. It all depends on how the dog was raised. You can tell Scarlet here is just a very nice, calm girl. She's not real friendly with the other dogs, so it makes it a little bit harder to get her a home. Most people that come here are looking for second dogs. There's dogs like Scarlet that come in and out of this facility every year, and it still astounds me that there's that many irresponsible people just throwing their dogs out into the street. One of the biggest reasons for pet abandonment is people need to rehome their dogs because they can't have them in the apartments that they live in. And that's why it's such a problem in the urban areas where we have a lot of rental properties. People should take that into consideration before they bring a pet into their home. You really need to talk with your landlord and make sure that you have permission to have that animal, because if you don't, you're going to end up in a situation where you have to rehome your pet. Rehoming a pet is not as easy as it seems. We have dogs that come in here. I mean, Scarlet's been here since last October, and she's a great dog. She just wants to lay in the grass and roll around and get some scratches on her belly. People need to realize a pet is a lifelong commitment. Dogs can live 10 to 15 years, cats can live up to 20 years. What is your plan if you cannot keep your pet? You have to ask yourself these questions before you take the animal into your home. You also have to realize that pets can cost a lot of money. They get sicknesses, illnesses, and diseases just like humans do. So if your dog breaks a leg, or if your dog gets some kind of illness, if they get cancer, if they start having seizures, what is your plan? How are you going to pay those medical expenses? Because simply dumping your dog off in the street so that the municipal animal control facility has to take them in and pay for that is really not the answer. And when we find out who dumps these dogs, and sometimes we do make arrests. It is animal cruelty to abandon your animal. I don't know what Scarlet's fate is, but I know what it's not. She's not a dog that's going to be put down for space. She's not a dog that's going to be abandoned again. She's going to be with us until she finds her forever home. This is not home. Although she does look comfortable here, this is not home. It's not home for any of them. If you're thinking about rescuing a dog, and you go to a reputable municipal animal control facility and make sure that your officers know the dogs. That's very important. A lot of these dogs here, even though they're friendly with people, they're adult dogs, and a lot of them don't have any kind of obedience training. So especially people that are coming in with smaller children, we really want to make sure that we're making a good match between the dog and the people. Make sure you bring all your household members down to the facility once you find a dog that you're interested in. If you have another dog in your home, you have to bring it in for a meet and greet. It is required. We have to make sure that the animals are going to get along before you bring it home. It avoids any kind of disasters that could happen. The next thing that you have to keep in mind is when you come to a facility, you're going to come up to the kennel area and the dogs are going to be barking and they're going to be acting crazy. They want to come out. They want to see you. And also, you're next to their territory. You're by their house, so that's how they're going to act. You have to trust your municipal animal control officers, and you have to listen to them when they tell you, listen, this is a really sweet dog. Let me just take her out for you. You wouldn't believe that this is the same dog when you see her at the kennel because she barks her head off like crazy. She looks like a vicious killer, but she's not. I can squeeze her paws, I can play with her face, I can touch her tail. She just wants to be paid attention to. She's a really loving dog. When you take your dog home, make sure that you establish yourself as the pack leader. Make sure that you line up some obedience classes for that dog because chances are they're going to need it. Make sure you have a place in your home for the dog to sleep and a designated place for your dog to eat. Establish rules and boundaries because that's something that a lot of these dogs have not had until they came here. Their rules and boundaries exist within their kennels and within the leashes that they walk with. But once you get into your home, they're going to get a little bit more freedom. You want to make sure that you still keep rules and boundaries in place for them. That'll keep them from having any kind of behavioral issues. And next, you want to make sure that you have the money to take the dog to the vet and have regular vet exams to make sure that they're not getting any sicknesses or illnesses. It's very important that you get your animal vet care. And I hope you'll join us again for our next episode of Animal 411. We're going to talk a little bit more about pet care, and we're going to talk more about animal abuse and some signs of animal abuse on our next episode. So I hope to see you here. Thank you for joining us. Sergeant Keller, New Britain Police Department.